Share my screen. I think that's the one I want. Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So today what we're going to talk about is alternative treatment programs to the 12-step meetings. Although, you know, AA obviously is the most popular, there are clients or patients who are a little resistant to AA, mainly due to the spirituality or the perceived religiosity of the 12-step programs. And so therefore, we want to present some other programs that you might use. But also, I think it's very important not just to understand how, you know, what programs are out there, but also how they work and what their philosophies are, what their advantages and disadvantages are, and to understand the differences and the similarities between 12-step programs and the alternatives. And also, I want you to become comfortable or more comfortable discussing and recommending alternative programs to patients when it's appropriate. So what I'm going to be presenting today are the 6 programs that are listed there. There's a lot of different programs out there, but Smart Recovery, Life Ring, SOS, and Women for Sobriety are the big ones. They're the most popular ones. Rational Recovery was a precursor to Smart Recovery, and I just wanted to touch base on that one. And the last one, Moderation Management, is really not appropriate for opiates, but it's something that I think you need to know. So I threw it in. Rational Recovery is a commercial vendor of materials. It's a for-profit entity. It was a for-profit entity. It sells materials for counseling, guidance, and direct instruction to addiction treatment. It was founded in 1986 by a social worker who was very dissatisfied with the spirituality of AA and formed a group. It was organized very similarly to AA in that there were meetings and they answered to a higher administration, which of course this guy was head of. And in 1993, he devised the Addictive Voice Recognition Treatment, AVRT. And this is a program in which he sold books, articles, audio CDs that addressed and, in his words, made meetings obsolete. It addressed everything that you needed to have addressed with regard to addiction. There was nothing better, and there would be nothing beyond that. The reason I bring it up is because I do want to discuss the addictive voice recognition technique. The premise of this technique is that if an addict desires to quit, he can. Not only can he quit, but he can quit permanently. But at the same time, at the opposite end of wanting to quit permanently is the, boy, I really could use something. It would really make me feel good. It would stop my anxiety. It would stop my depression. It would eliminate my problems for now. And so you have this balance between wanting it and not wanting it. And this balance or this ambivalence is what the program calls addiction, or what they define addiction as. One of the things I tell all of my patients is that there is a voice. At least for me, there is a voice. Most of you probably know, but those of you who didn't, I've probably attended 2,000 AA meetings in the last 30 years that I've been sober and clean. And I can tell you that that voice is very, very powerful. At this point, when I start to hear the voice, which is very rarely, I can shut him down in probably 3 or 4 seconds, but that is a skill that took me a long time to develop. So this addictive voice in order for this program to work, you have to, number one, commit to permanent abstinence, and number two, you have to recognize instantly that voice and make a conscious effort to ignore that voice. What I tell all of my patients is that there's a subconscious voice that you will hear most of the time. You'll hear it when things aren't going well, when the shit's hitting the fan, so to speak. And then you'll hear this voice, and this voice will say, "Hey, Ken, you know, you deserve to be happy. And you know what'll make you happy? And all these problems will be gone, and you'll feel great, and the depression will be gone, and it'll be just wonderful." That's what the voice says. And what I try to tell my patients is, and what the addictive voice recognition technique gets into is, how are you going to feel the next day when you walk into the bathroom and look in the mirror? When you look in the mirror, you're going to like who you see if you relapse the day before? Are you going to trust who you see? And are you going to trust, like, and now I'm blocking. Doesn't matter. The bottom line is that these are things which can go on for a long time. That you won't trust someone, like someone, or respect. Those are the three things. Those are the three most important things. And the whole purpose of recovery is to get this relationship established. And you can lose it in a second. And you don't just stay high for an hour and that's it. And then the next day, it can be months, years before these feelings come back. So this is where this was first really described. And the way they do this is by calling the voice it. So I don't want to relapse. I don't want to use. It wants to. It wants to. When you compare the two between rational recovery and the 12-step program, rational recovery really demands a permanent abstinence, whereas AA is one day at a time. And I will tell you, when about my second or third meeting in recovery, I was shipped kicking and screaming to Virginia for a 90-day treatment. Back in 1990, and when I was finally released to go to outside meetings, and I did, but I guess it was maybe the second or third meeting. They asked for birthdays, which of course is what an anniversary in Ohio or Northeast Ohio is called, but it's your rebirth when you're becoming sober. And somebody stood up and said, "This is my 20th birthday." And I looked at the guy and I thought to myself, bullshit. No one, absolutely no one can possibly stay clean and sober for 20 years. The guy's a plant. He's there to make everybody think that this thing works, because it doesn't. It can't. No one can stay clean and sober. So the bottom line, where I'm trying to get at is, there's an awful lot of people like me, I think, in early treatment, and they can't conceive of this. So rational recovery, when it demands permanent abstinence, that's a pretty big pill to swallow. And I just want to throw that out. The other things you can see there's no meetings, no steps, no higher power. There is no socialization, and it's a for-profit program. It no longer exists. What happened, the people in rational recovery, when this came out and he announced that he was disbanding all meetings and that was going to be it, well, a group of them decided to break off. They didn't like the fact that it was a profit situation, and they also wanted to continue meetings. So they broke off and formed Smart Recovery. Smart Recovery stands for Self-Management and Recovery Training. It's an abstinence-based program, as was Rational Recovery. It's a not-for-profit. It survives just like AA does, exactly like AA does, with member contributions and outside donations. The outside donations must be free of all strings and politics. for them to accept the money. It's open to all addiction problems, which is a difference between Smart Recovery and 12 steps. Each 12-step program technically has their own target. So AA is alcohol, Narcotics Anonymous are the opiates, etc. But this is open to everyone. So you can go there, and there could be people with drug addiction, eating addiction, gambling addiction, sex addiction, etc. The meeting format is sort of based the same way as AA is. There's weekly meetings, but it's facilitated by a volunteer. The volunteer is not someone from the group that volunteers. It's someone who volunteers and contacts the central office of Smart Recovery, pays money to take a 30-hour online course so that he can learn how to use the tools of Smart Recovery to teach members how to stay clean and sober, how to cope with their lives, and teach members how to help each other. It's based on a 4-point program, which I have listed there: building and maintaining the motivation for change and staying clean, coping with urges, managing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and ultimately living a balanced life. I'm going to just talk real briefly about 3 tools. The first one is the ABCs. And the main point of this one is that our actions and feelings are not the result of outside forces. They're results of what we are inside, what we think, what we believe. So our actions and feelings are within our control. We can control them. And so we can change them accordingly. So we can try, if there is an activating event or an adverse event, it's up to our beliefs to be positive, to how we approach the adverse event. And if we approach it positively, there will be minimal consequences. And if there's not consequences, there will hopefully not be a relapse. And that's basically what this tool is. The second tool that I want to just talk very briefly about is an urge log, where people take a little spiral notebook, the one that fits in your shirt pocket or in your purse. And when you have an urge, you pull out the thing and you write it down. I had an urge to use at such and such time, and when I was walking the dog, and it just so happens that I saw a piece of paper on the ground that made me think of my drug dealer or something like that. Okay, so you discuss the actual event and how it happened, how long it lasted, what you did about it, and whether that worked. And so when you go to meetings, that's basically what you do is you bring that log in and you would talk about it. And the last thing, which is one thing that I do with every one of my patients, is I do a cost-benefit analysis. I didn't even know I was following the Smart Recovery program until now, but basically that's what I'm doing. And you can see here, using is pretty open and shut. Either you do or you don't. If you do, either it's good or it's bad. So if you use, what is that going to do? Well, I can tell you, it'll make you feel really good. It'll take away your depression. It'll take away your anxiety. All your problems gone, completely gone. It's wonderful. The problem is it only lasts for about an hour. That's the problem. And then what happens the next day? That's when you have the loss of respect, the loss of trust, and the disliking oneself, the regret over doing it. And if it leads to addiction, it can lead to all sorts of problems. And there can be a social cost to it, the breaking relations with family. And these things, they're not an hour. These are long-term things. It can take years for a relationship that was based on trust and then destroyed to be rebuilt. So these are long-term effects. And then if you look at not using, the plus and the minus, and this is what I discuss with patients. If you don't use, you may not feel any better that moment, but the next morning when you walk into the bathroom and you look in the mirror, you're going to point to that person in the mirror and you're going to say, you almost screwed up yesterday, but you didn't. And that's that. You'll feel good about yourself. You'll feel proud. You'll feel that you were responsible. You can be a role model for siblings, for kids, for parents, for anyone. And that is a long-term effect as well. And then when you look at not using the minuses or the disadvantages of not using, well, you'll lose your using friends. Yeah, well, I can tell you categorically, there's not going to be too many using friends that are going to be calling you once you're in recovery. And most of my patients understand that. There can be some boredom and anxiety. And of course, the problems that you have are still with you. But now you have the opportunity to start working on them. And so hopefully they'll be short term. And so most of the good things about staying clean are long-term advantages, and most of the bad things about using are short-term advantages. So you can kind of see that this is one of the things that's done. So when you look at the Smart Term Recovery Program versus 12-step program, the philosophy is that there's multiple ways to recover. There's not one way to do things. It does incorporate the scientific knowledge, the addiction theory, and it's not adverse to pharmacologic support or professional counseling. The philosophy is definitely not set in stone, okay? It changes as science changes. So the Smart Recovery Handbook is rewritten as necessary to encompass the latest changes in science and everything else. You compare that to the big book. The big book consists of two parts. The first part is the first 164 pages, and that is set in stone. That is word for word exactly as Bill W. wrote it in, I believe, 1938. The second half of the book is the success stories and the various stories that they put in there of people's experiences in AA. And those, of course, are updated every 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is, to new editions. So that's the only part that really changes. Smart Recovery does not say that addiction is a disease. Each individual decides. Now, when AA was forming, when Dr. Bob and Bill W. were trying to get more people into their little clique, they needed it to be a disease. They needed it to be a disease for one reason, because back in 1938, if you had a disease, that wasn't too good. You had a disease, that meant you were probably dying of something. A disease wasn't curable. Today, disease doesn't have quite that connotation. And the actual situation here, disease no longer really implies total powerlessness, which is what they needed in order to recruit people. We don't need that today. So, you know, it's not quite as big a deal, but nonetheless, that is one of the major differences between the 12-step programs and all the other programs. 12-step, it is a disease. The other programs, it could be a disease if you want it to be. Another point is there's no higher power or spirituality. Well, I don't know about that, because they do emphasize the power of the group. They do emphasize that you will learn not just from the facilitator, but you're going to learn from each other. And they do share phone numbers. They do all of this. Well, that's a higher power. That group is a higher power. Anybody who knows more than you do is a higher power. It's not the highest power. Highest power is God. Doesn't say highest power. It says higher power in AA. So is there some spirituality here and we're just calling it a different term? Yeah, probably. And of course, the last thing that's important is the number of meetings. There's only 2,200 meetings in the US versus 60,000 AA meetings alone in the US. Worldwide, there's only 3,500 smart recovery meetings, 2,200 of which are in the US. In Northeast Ohio, there are 18 meetings. In Cleveland alone, just the Cleveland metropolitan area, Cleveland and its Cuyahoga County suburbs, there are over 700 AA meetings, just AA meetings each week. So there's a big difference between smart recovery and AA. Both are non-professional, as I said, both have leaders, but there's another difference between Smart Recovery and 12-step program. If a facilitator, first of all, a facilitator doesn't have to be a drug addict or have an addiction problem. Doesn't have to have any kind of addiction problem at all. That's all he has to do is pay his money and do the 30 hours, and he can then form a group. Whereas in AA, the leader is usually elected, and he has someone that has to have been in AA for at least a year. In addition, that facilitator, if he relapses on his addiction, although it's hoped and expected that he will step down as a facilitator, he doesn't have to. He paid his money, remember. So AA members would demand it. It's another difference. There's no sponsor-sponsee relationship, but if you look at AA doesn't require you to get a sponsor, and it doesn't tell the sponsor how to work. So yeah, there's sponsors, but if you don't want one, you don't have to have one. Again, the implication is that everyone has to have a sponsor. No, everyone doesn't have to have a sponsor. In fact, a lot of people who are in AA and not firmly committed to it don't have sponsors. So that's really the way it is. And as I said, it was an offshoot of Rational Recovery. AA was an offshoot of the very religious Christian Oxford group. So another one that I want to discuss is the Life Ring Secular Recovery. It was founded in 2001. So again, relatively later. It's also an abstinence-based program. The philosophy of it is that only human effort counts. That's all you need. You don't need divine intervention. So it's not necessary to have a higher power or God or religion or anything else. Self-help is the key. What you do, what efforts you put forth, that's what counts. They do have meetings. The meetings are a little different. They don't judge a person in the meetings, whereas in AA, there can be some judging. People will give their opinion, and if it's a negative opinion, it's a negative opinion. What members do is they share their previous week's successes and failures. Each week, the meeting has the same topic. How was your week? And this is where people can bring in whatever they want to bring in about what happened in the past week and how they handled it. And other people can kind of help them and guide them as to what they would do. And at the end of the meeting, everyone applauds each other. They applaud each other because they're there, because they're trying to be sober or they are sober. Life Ring says that relapse is, not that it's expected, but it's not as negative as I guess it would be in AA. Although in AA, we welcome people back also. But a fall in the pit, a gain in your wit. They also have a recovery by choice workbook, which is very similar to part 1 of the big book. And they have humanly possible success stories, which is like part 2 of the big book. So they're kind of similar. And these books are revised as needed. They have a lot of examples of tools. Members develop their own tools all the time, and then they share them at meetings, and then they become tools. And if they're really good, they get worked into the next edition of the workbook. And you can see that some of these things like honesty, openness, willingness, these are all things that you hear in AA meetings as well. There's no sponsors, but members do readily share phone contacts and emails. MAT and MOUD, totally accepted. They only have one step. Don't drink or use no matter what. That's it. The next organization I want to discuss is Secular Organization for Sobriety, or SOS, Save Ourselves. It was founded in 1985 by an alcoholic who wrote an article that really downplayed religion in treatment, and it it got a tremendous response. And so this guy organized a self-help group. First meeting was in North Hollywood, California in 1986. Again, like the Smart Recovery and Life Ring, it's nonprofit, abstinence-based, non-professional network of autonomous groups. There's no religious undertones, and it was founded specifically as an alternative to AA. You don't surrender to a higher power. You don't need to remain sober. But if you want to, you can. And there are a certain percentage, it's I think 20 or 30% is what I read, that are members of both AA and SOS. So it's not that it excludes you, it's just that they're not interested in talking about it. SOS also recognizes the science. Again, it's a big deal. But SOS does not consider it a disease unless you want to consider it a disease. You know, it's your member's choice. And it's a cognitive program that places the highest priority on sobriety. The priority one is staying sober. And there's guidelines for staying sober. And the guidelines I have posted here. Basically, to break the cycle of denial and achieve sobriety, we first must acknowledge that we are alcoholics and addicts. So when I read that, I said, first step. We admitted we were powerless over our drug, that our lives had become unmanageable. Very, very similar. And then we affirmed this daily and accept it without reservation. And again, priority is sobriety one. This is the thing. You gotta stay sober. You don't drink. Quality of life can be much improved if you do so. And again, they're anonymous. They share in confidence with each other, their thoughts and feelings. And that's basically how it works. There is a cycle of addiction and there's a cycle of sobriety. The cycle of addiction is just the chemical and scientific and hereditary aspects of addiction versus the learned habit. So you have this underlying situation and you learn what makes you feel better. And when you do that repeatedly, it becomes a mental habit and a physiologic habit. Obviously, it becomes dependence. So you have a learned habit and you have a chemical need, and you don't know you have either. And that's what the cycle of addiction is. And to counter that, you have to counter that with the knowledge that you have an addiction, what it's done to you, and that you're prioritizing sobriety. And that's basically how it works. If you prioritize sobriety, your life is going to get better. If your life is going to get better, there's going to be less chance of hearing that stupid little voice. And hopefully you'll be able to resist urges better and your life will continue to get better. So when you look at SOS versus 12-step programs, we've already talked about a lot of this. The addict doesn't turn his will and his life over to the care of a higher power. It's a self-empowering program. He builds his own program. Now, I hope he knows how to do it. I know when I came into the program, if somebody didn't tell me exactly what to do, I would have just sat there and said, F this, I'm not doing any of this stuff. And the only reason I went to meetings, did all that, is because some stupid idiot had my license hanging over my head. So I had to do these things, and I just did it for lip service because I thought it was all a bunch of baloney. So I don't know that SOS would have really worked very well for me. It wasn't around, of course, when I came into recovery, but again, I wasn't there for me. And if I wasn't there for me, this program isn't going to work. Women for Sobriety. This is a very good program. It's a very powerful program. It was founded by a female sociologist in 1979. It's a program that recognizes the uniqueness of women in that women have a maternal responsibility. Okay, women are of course the bearer of children, and in a large part the raising of children, and this can form an additional conflict in their living in society, and can contribute to the guilt, depression, low self-esteem, which are common problems in women and in men. But you have this extra little difference that women have that needs to be discussed with other women, because men don't get it. And I sort of get that. I understand that would be the case. And so I can see where a meeting of women discussing self-enhancing behavior, discussing empowerment with very strong, powerful reinforcement would be very, very, very helpful. And it is a popular program. So the New Life program works by positive reinforcement and improving the body. And they do that with yoga, relaxation techniques, meditation, exercise, etc., in a very dynamic group involvement. So although their meetings are mostly online, they are lively meetings. They are meetings where people are supporting each other. Now, Women for Sobriety has 13 acceptance statements, of which I decided only to list 10. Now, why I did that, I'm not really sure, but I did. You'll see the statement, and you'll see also the italics next to it. The italics is what is stated after the acceptance statement is read at the meeting. So 13 people will read an acceptance statement, and then they'll read the little narrative. So they're both done at the meetings. But if you'll look at this, like the first one that I have listed there is, I have a life-threatening problem that once had me. We admitted we were powerless over our drug, that our lives had become unmanageable. Again, pretty similar. Negative thoughts destroy only myself. That's a great affirmation. And there's a lot of that here. And what Women for Sobriety say is, if you can take these 13 statements, if you can take them and internalize them, if you can make them part of you, you will be a better person. You will be a stronger person. You will be a more positive person. Women for Sobriety believe that thoughts always precede actions. So if you think positively, you will act positively, and your life will be better. Negative thoughts, negative actions can lead to relapse, okay? And they do acknowledge that there are problems that can create unhappiness and anxiety that can be brought into a recovery program. And this is where the support of the women with each other, helping each other to deal with this, because they all have the same basic situation. They live in the same society, and they can address concerns that they feel with each other. The meetings are mostly online, as I said. There's only one in-person meeting within a 100-mile radius of Cleveland. The format is very similar to AA. It opens with the recitation of the 13 steps. When a member wants to, or when they go around for personal introductions, the personal introduction is, my name is Karen, and I'm a competent woman. Whereas when I go to meetings, my name is Ken, and I'm an addict alcoholic. It's not as positive. I don't say I'm a recovering addict and alcoholic. I say I'm an addict and alcoholic. So you can see there's a difference between AA and Women for Sobriety. And where I really think Women for Sobriety shine is at the end. They all stand up, they all hold hands, just like we do in AA. But instead of reciting the Lord's Prayer, they state, we are capable and competent, caring and compassionate, always willing to help another, bonded together in overcoming addiction. It's a powerful statement, and it's a great way to end a meeting. Much better than AA, I think. So one of the major things that I want to discuss about the differences between the two programs is that Women for Sobriety ignore their past. What you did before you came into the rooms of Women for Sobriety doesn't count. Whereas AA says, no, you did some things, you had some character defects that were not very good, and therefore they have to be worked on. You did some things to people, you have to make amends. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to get beyond your past to be able to shape a better today and tomorrow. No sponsor, no steps, but they do have the 13 acceptance statements. Addiction is a difficult problem. It's not a disease, okay? It's spiritual, but without the concept of higher power. It is a very spiritual program in that the women help each other. They really pull together. Moderation management, I don't want to spend a lot of time on. It's mainly for alcohol, and what it says is, you can do it, but you can do it in moderation. And the only reason I bring it up is because well, I found it humorous. It was founded in 1994 by an alcoholic woman who failed her own program because in 2000, she drove her truck the wrong way on a highway while completely drunk, had a head-on collision with a car and killed a father and his 12-year-old daughter in a head-on collision, for which she went to prison. Now, what MM does, or moderation management does, is they tell you to keep a diary of your drinking and work out ahead of time how many drinks you can possibly have to be safe, to have a safe blood alcohol content, and determine your limits before you set out to start drinking. And then you're supposed to keep a diary of all your drinks. And I guess that works great as long as you're sober enough to remember to write it down. If you don't, well, I don't know. And they do have a cutback app, which I thought was very humorous, that helps you keep track of the number of drinks that you had. Of course, you have to be sober enough to be able to use your phone and get into the app and record it. It also sends daily text messages. So the bottom line, we've talked about 4 good programs. What do they all have in common? Well, first of all, they all have complete abstinence in common. They all focus on the self, including AA. It focuses on the person and relationships to self, to others. Every program empowers the individual. The bottom line for all recovery programs is that you ultimately are responsible for a relapse. Helps members gain insight into the problems and the consequences of addiction and the need to change. There is no scientific proof that any one program is really better than the other. Now, there is, I was told today, John said that he has a thing he's posting that just came out very recently that indicates that there may be a slight edge with Alcoholics Anonymous. But this study was in 2017 and 2018, where they took 651 respondents. They followed them every 3 months for a year. And when they analyzed the results, there was no difference in the the number of meetings someone attended in 30 days, the peer support contacts, member satisfaction, or the severity of addiction or demographics when you compared AA versus Smart Recovery, LifeRing, or Women for Sobriety. Some of the important differences are again listed there. And we've talked a little bit about spirituality. The only program that has sponsorship is AA. The only program that has a large number of meetings in person, pre-COVID, of course, is AA. Powerlessness is embraced by AA and rejected by others, but the powerlessness that AA accepts was designed, at least initially, to attract members, and it was to really to prove a point, because when you admit that you're powerless, you can gain power by that admission. It's rather complicated, but it's like surrender to win. One of the bumper stickers of AA. It's the same type of concept. And of course, AA is the only one that really is emphatic about it being a disease concept. So there's references. The best references to go to if you want to know more about these things is just go online to the homepage of the different treatment programs and start reading. Smart Recovery has a lot of little film clips that you can watch online, and they're really fascinating. It's quite enjoyable to go through that. And lastly, I know it's late and I've taken a long time, but I thought this was very important. When you do your CME evaluation, please do me a favor and let me know if there's any other topics that you want me to discuss with regard to 12 steps. If any of the programs that I've held previously you want repeated, I'll be happy to do that. If there's other things you want me to go into more detail with, I'd be happy to do that too. I realize that it's very difficult for someone who is not in recovery and has maybe attended, one or two AA meetings to be able to answer questions or counter or redirect criticisms. And so I just want you to, let me know what you want. And if I can do it, I will. Thank you.